So what have you seen from doing conversion rate optimization for your clients? Is there some best practices on what people can do? My average audience is companies that have been established on the web already. They're already doing pay-per-click. They're already doing landing pages. Is there really some best practices in order to, help people increase their conversion from, websites these days?
Best practices is an interesting concept. And even learning from the experts too. If you pay attention to Tim Ash, he has a lot of great advice on best practices. Another expert, Chris Goward of Wired Funnel, talks a lot against best practices actually. And he has some good case studies that talk about, hey, best practices say to do X, but we actually tested Y and that ended up winning. So my advice on best practices is to use them as a starting point. But not to rely on them. So best practices, for example, if you have a picture of people in your landing page, don't have somebody who's way too attractive and somebody who's looking directly at you, because our brains are hardwired from the time that we're born. Actually, babies, only a couple weeks old, look directly at their parents' faces. So our brains are hardwired to look at faces. And in your landing pages, if you have a face, especially a very prominent face that takes up a lot of real estate on the screen, and especially a very attractive face, our eyes are drawn to that person. And so much so that we may lose the value statement, we may lose the call to action. So that's a best practice. However, I would never say that that's a hard and fast rule.
Sure.
You want to test everything. So use those best practices as kind of a checkpoint when you're building your landing page, but then test, because there are certainly times when the best practices have lost in tests.
Yeah, you put that picture up there, and you create this hypothesis that she may be too attractive, or but you're really not sure how your audience is going to react, and it could even be based on the individual ad that they came over for. Maybe it's a shorter, harder sell, and they would expect maybe a more aggressive photo. And that type of thing. So you definitely really have to understand your audience. Great. Let's check out some examples that you brought, and we could take a look at what Conversion Max does.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite case studies. This was a client of ours where the primary goal of the site was to get people to request a quote with them. And this is an expensive service that they were offering. These leads go to a sales team, and the salespeople follow up, and it takes a good 6 months to a year for them to make a sale. So the variation on the left was their original. And the dotted line shows where the fold is on most people's monitors. And this is important to look in analytics to see what size monitor your audience has. And what we found when we were looking at a lot of click maps and heat maps is that people were very reluctant to fill out the information on the top, where immediately the form is asking name, contact information, company, all this information about them. But the people who scrolled down the page were very willing to talk about what they needed. So the questions were something about what services are you interested in, what's your budget, things like that. People actually wanted to talk about their needs, but they didn't want to reveal who they were right off the bat. Furthermore, a heat map showed that a lot of attention was getting wasted on that blue banner up on the top. So people weren't even really noticing that form was there, because the eye was drawn to all the elements up in the blue area. There were no trust symbols and really no credibility for people who want to know a little bit about the company or just feel some trust in giving their contact information. So our hypothesis then was, let's get rid of the distraction on the top, so people notice immediately that there is a form and they see that it's a short form without having to scroll down the page. We changed the order of the questions. So we start off with the questions people wanted to answer, right? I need whatever services, and then the name and contact information came at the end. And it's always a compromise with the sales team when you want to cut out information, right? Because your salespeople want to know everything about the lead, but we were able to compromise with them and figure out that all that they really needed was name and email. They don't absolutely have to have the company name and the country and separate the first and last name. So we get the bare minimum of what they can work with. And then we added, you can see the credentials along the right sidebar. So those are some trust symbols. And then right about where the fold was is where we put some customer logos as well as a testimonial. And when we ran this A/B test, sure enough, we got a 71% increase. So if you think about 71% more leads going to that sales team, this was big money for this company. And it all goes back to figuring out what the problem is. Like you said, if we had been trying to test the button color on that original one, if we had tested a green button versus an orange button, there's no way we would have gotten a 71% lift, right? But when you actually go through the process of figuring out what's preventing people from filling out this form and figure out what your hypothesis is that you think will improve it, that's when you see big wins like this.
Thanks for watching on iTunes. I really appreciate all the feedback that I've received so far. If you haven't connected to me already, I would love to connect with you. Just reach out to me on Twitter at alexdessigns, alexdesignspodcast. Just go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter at alexdesigns. You can even just go ahead and email me. I would love to connect with like-minded, conversion-focused people just like you. Email me, alex@alexdesigns.com.